We've got the good, the bad, and the legislature in Sacramento is still ugly. Right now, we've got both ends of the spectrum with Senate Bill 15 trying to tear down FFLs, and on the other end, Assembly Bill 584 trying to help the FFLs out. Let's talk about it. Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel today. That is right, we've got the good and the bad coming out of Sacramento after a reluctant start to the 2025 legislative session. To talk us through a couple of these bills here, we have brought back the CRPA legislative director. You can also find him on AM 590 The Answer. He is host of the Firing Line radio show. That, of course, is Rick Travis. Rick, thanks for being with us today.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely, especially on days like this. But before we get into that, guys, please, as always, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to these videos. It really helps with the algorithms, push this message out as far as possible, and it's a great way for you to directly contribute to the Second Amendment litigative and legislative efforts throughout the state here in California. So with that, Rick, let's go ahead and hit the bad first. It seems like, we talked about at the beginning of the legislative session, they hadn't really come out with a lot of pointed bills, but they brought placeholder bills. This looks like it was one of them. It's SB 15, originally for gun violence prevention. Now it's been changed to firearms. The legislative digest reads like this. Jacob, if you can pull it up. It says the bill would, this is in regards to FFLs being audited by DOJ. It says the bill would authorize the department to periodically increase the inspector fee as specified. The bill would require the department to annually inspect the 10 firearm dealer locations as specified with the highest percentage of total sales that were recovered by law enforcement and found to be illegally possessed, used in a crime, or suspected to have been used in a crime. The bill would require the department to conduct the inspections within 12 months of the release of its annual report unless the dealer location has been inspected 6 months prior to the release of the report. The bill would also require firearms dealers commencing January 1st, 2028 to maintain inventory records as specified at their place of business in a manner prescribed by the department. The bill would additionally require firearms dealers to produce an affidavit under penalty of perjury certifying the accuracy of all records upon request. By expanding the crime of perjury, this bill would also impose a state-mandated local program. The bill would additionally authorize the department to remove a person from the centralized list who has failed to comply with licensing requirements or who, among other things, failed to allow the department to conduct an inspection or failed to maintain accurate business hours with the department. This bill could make a violation of these provisions punishable by a fine and render a person ineligible for placement on the centralized list for 2 years from the date of removal from the list. So, Rick, looking at this, like I said, it looks like some of this legislation is starting to take shape. It's not a placeholder bill anymore. As far as this one is concerned, can you go ahead and break it down a little bit for us? I mean, you have the blanket statement of this legislature just won't leave FFLs alone. We're seeing some of this at the local level with Board of Supervisors and city councils as well. Can you break this down and what it means as far as the bill is concerned?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things I want to highlight. Number one, this bill was put as a placeholder for the Office of Gun Violence Prevention. That was largely because Donald J. Trump, when coming to office, had destroyed the Office of Gun Violence Prevention in the White House, got rid of it. One of the very first things he did on day one. He had highlighted he was going to do that back in November, right after the election, said that was going bye-bye as one of his campaign promises. And immediately, Catherine Blakespear, the senator behind Senate Bill 15, came up with this placeholder bill because there was talks of trying to move that office from Washington, D.C. to Sacramento. And so that was kind of what we were anticipating. Of course, the governor wants to get money from the federal government, so he's not going to do that. He's a lame duck. He's not getting money from those groups. As we also know, during the time from when this bill was introduced, the first part of December during the special session, that there's been a lot that's come out that shows that our adversaries have been getting taxpayer funds through USAID and others to fight us in the Capitol across. There was a story that broke today talking about the hundreds of attorneys that have been paid for by taxpayer dollars to dismantle the Second Amendment and other constitutional amendments. So when we're looking at that battlefield, there's also what I like to call constitutional derangement syndrome, which the left-leaning Dems, especially in this state, have. Catherine Blakespear has it. And CDS is what's at heart here. She wants to go on after FFLs because she keeps trying to criminalize FFL. Keeps trying to make them the reason. She reaches for everything. You know, Mexico is being held accountable. So Mexico is saying, oh, well, it's your FFLs that send guns. So Catherine Blakespear said, well, see, there's the Mexican government. She doesn't check it. She doesn't verify the information, which is full of holes. She just immediately runs. So what this is designed to do is this bill is in her mind, there are 10 evil FFLs that are doing everything wrong in this state, and she's going to find them. That's what this bill's about. Trying to find those FFLs that have the most violations, put them under penalty of perjury so she can lock them up and take away their FFL status. And we're going to be fighting this every step of the way because this is filled with over and over unconstitutional issues that we're going to be poking at and making sure that this bill does not get across the line.
Well, I do want to talk to you about constitutionality here in a second, but I'm also sort of curious. Do we have legislators now trying to knock down two birds with one stone? I'm just sort of curious, is this specifically aimed at FFLs? And I'm speaking specifically to the raise in fees. It seems like everything that we're seeing here, whether it's at the local level or at the state level, they're looking to get more money out of the Second Amendment community. So, like, how much money is enough money? Are we thinking here that we can also get more money from fees to help with this budget deficit that we have in California? Or is it literally just to rid the state of these FFLs altogether?
It's the latter, Kevin. It's never been about the other things. I mean, look, with all the FFL fee raises, that doesn't even put a ding in this budget. I mean, we're literally spending tens of thousands of dollars per minute on servicing debt in the state, just like we are in the country. So the little bit of money that they would get from this when it was all said and done it's nothing. What this is designed to do, and let me be perfectly clear, is to knock people out of business. They're doing everything from the top to take out the big box stores like a Turner's or a Sportsman's Warehouse or a Bass Pro Cabela's, and the list goes on, like multi-chain FFLs. And they're doing everything to crush the mom and pop little stores and get rid of them. And this is designed to do that. They keep trying to raise the fees. Look, what do we call medicine, Kevin? We call it a practice. What do we call being a lawyer? A practice. Why? Because mistakes do happen. We don't want them to happen. And God forbid it happens if you're the patient or the client, but they do happen. Mistakes happen with FFLs drafting paperwork, just like anybody listening to this video in any job, you've made a mistake or two. What they're trying to do is say, oh, you made a mistake. You didn't catch the person's middle name. You didn't get the suite number or apartment number right. You know what? That's a $5,000 fine. Now imagine if every secretary, every student, every person that ever, and I'll hit the people that are even older watching this, remember the days of little things called whiteout and autocorrect and everything. If every time one of those went off, there's a $5,000 fine. Well, you know what? You wouldn't be in your job very long. And that's the goal. We can't forget the goal since 2016 of this governor, Gavin Newsom, was to crush the Second Amendment culture in California, to get rid of it. One of the means that Saul Alinsky used in Rules for Radicals, which they follow legitimately in this capital, is tax and fine the people to death. So they just use money as the way to control the masses. And that's what they're doing.
And if they can't find those mistakes, perhaps they create a scenario where they can make something up to take away your FFL altogether. I'm curious, and this was the constitutionality question that I had for you. How problematic is this language? And Jacob, maybe you can highlight it so they can see the specific part that I'm reading here. The bill would additionally authorize the department to remove a person from the centralized list who has failed to comply with the licensing requirement or who, among other things, failed to allow the department to conduct an inspection. What exactly does fail mean in this situation is kind of what I'm curious about. Are they opening themselves up to the opportunity where they can just say, hey, these guys did not, to my satisfaction, 100% comply with a DOJ inspection. Therefore, they have failed. Therefore, I can remove them from the central server for 2 years. Do you see that as a possibility here?
As a possibility or as a fact? That's a fact. That's exactly what this is going to do. This isn't a possibility. Let's not sugarcoat it. They want it so that they can say, oh, on a Monday, a Tuesday, whatever the day of the week is, I don't think you complied, Kevin. You're gone. And what's more, is businesses, look, I'll use fast foods. Fast foods in a lot of counties have those ABC ratings. And so you get a C rating, it hurts your business, but you stay in business. And it may take you 6 months to get back to that A, but you're still in business. You still got income. You still can survive. It's what comes after that and eligible for placement for 2 years, which means you're out of business for 2 years. Businesses can't survive. You can't pay your lease. You can't keep your storeroom, your clients, everything else. After 2 years, you're done. But they're doing this to sit there and say, well, we didn't say they were done. But yes, you did. That's what you're doing. You're trying to push them out. And look, no one, look, what people don't understand is you can't sell the business because no one's going to be able to go back in there because the landlord's going to go, I'm not taking that risk. I need someone's paying rent. So this is literally crushing the business, crushing the community.
Well, we saw some legislation last year and the year prior that was pretty directly attacking the Second Amendment community as a whole. We identified that legislation as very dangerous. Fortunately, we were able to beat all of it, just about all of it back. Would you say that this is along the same lines as some of that detrimental legislation last year? Are we running parallel here, just sort of putting the magnifying glass on the FFLs?
No, it's a different tact. I mean, last year was about the big gun grab led by Portantino. It was about bringing in the collection of all of our firearms, setting that up. I mean, that's clearly what that was. This is now a target attack. And I think what you're going to see in this legislature is they're targeting the fringes as they see it and trying to work their way back in because when they went for the throat last year, they lost and lost very quickly. But they realized something, Kevin, we are not loyal as a business culture in this country. You know, there was a day of probably reaching back to my grandfather, which puts it way back, when if you bought Ford, you only bought Ford. If you bought Chevy, you only bought Chevy, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Today, you know, people wear Patagonia tops with Nike bottoms, with Adidas shoes. Like it's not all one company. And because of that, the government's learned we can attack companies and get away with it because people don't defend those companies or those businesses. And that's what they're banking on is they're going to be able to go after FFLs and people are going to be like, well, I can just go here or I can just go there. There's no sweat off of my brow. Well, yeah, it is. Because the more that diminishes, the longer the lines, the longer the wait, the longer everything.
Well, and if you just sort of look down the slippery slope, if the legislation here would be to investigate the 10 highest FFLs as far as crime or whatever is concerned, when those 10 are gone, that list doesn't just go away. The next 10 are now the top 10. So this is a continuous effort here. And if you get rid of FFLs in California, you don't have that shop right down the street that you can go to, but guess what? You're also not importing from other states because you would need an FFL to transfer those firearms to. So attacking FFLs.
It's not just that. It's, you know, you got an aging population, a lot of people that invest as part of their retirement plan, their firearms. I've known several people that did that, and it was a wise decision because firearms over the last 30 years have appreciated at a higher rate than a savings plan or a lot of IRAs would have. But now California limits how many you can get rid of at a time. Like they're doing everything to crush this, Kevin. And if you remove the FFLs, what are you going to do when you're in your 80s and you want to get rid of it because you want that money for your grandkids or what have you, you know, go on that final trip, whatever it is you want to do, fight cancer. You can't because you're not going to pack everything up in a protected truck and move it across state lines. You're just not going to do it.
Yeah, so sincerely limiting that option, which also limits the options for growth in the future. Well, and this is one that we're going to be paying attention to very closely and obviously advocating against. Guys, I know that we haven't mentioned this in a video for a while, but now we are starting to see the legislation, so be sure to check your emails. We're going to have some of that one-click politics where you can advocate against bills just like this, including this, coming up at these committee meetings in the near future. But Rick, if we can really quick, drastically change gears because something awesome is also happening in the legislature. That takes the form of Assembly Bill 584, and it reads from the Legislative Digest like this. Existing law defines a secure facility for purposes of requirements for firearms dealers to store firearms when the dealer is not open for business as a building that, among other requirements, has perimeter doorways with specified characteristics, including that the doorway is a windowless or windowed steel security door equipped with both deadbolt and doorknob lock as specified, or a metal grate that is padlocked and affixed to the licensee's premise as specified. Existing law defines a secure facility for purposes of requirements for firearms manufacturers to store manufactured firearms and barrels as a facility that has perimeter doorways with additional specified characteristics, including that the doorway has hinges and hasps attached to doors by welding, riveting, or bolting with nuts on the inside of the door, or that is installed so that they cannot be removed when the doors are closed or locked. This bill would expand the definition of a secure facility for the entities described above to allow a doorway with a windowed or windowless steel door that is equipped with panic hardware that operates a multi-point lock that bolts into the interior frame of the door as specified. So, holy smokes, a lot of stuff here about doors and windows and deadbolts and doorknobs. Can you break this bill down for us? Why is it so important for FFLs? And I mean, I guess it's great. You know, we see it. We see some legislation that's attacking FFLs. Now we have some legislation that is trying to help FFLs. But what exactly is happening right now that we need a bill like this? And can you break it down for us?
Sure. So I'm really proud of this bill. This is the first pro Second Amendment bill to come out in decades. We are pushing this bill along with several other bills that are coming out because, as promised to all of our constituents, we're no longer fighting on our heels to defend. We're now on our toes fighting back. And this bill is the first of a package of bills that we're bringing forward fighting back for your Second Amendment rights. This bill specifically goes out to mostly your large box stores, some of your medium-sized FFLs as well. But think of like a Turner's Outdoorsman that, they have been expanding, as has Sportsman's Warehouse, as has Bass Pro. But Bass Pro generally builds their own building. The others tend to take over buildings or multiple offices in a strip mall or some other location like that. A lot of those doors, because of whatever was there previously, do not meet the code. And for a FFL, they have two different codes they have to meet. They have to meet the penal code with the Department of Justice that was written back in like the 80s, and then you have to do the local fire code and the state fire code. Well, the state fire code and local fire code are more up to date. So what happens is they go to move in, they go to do the door check, DOJ comes out and says, no. And they're like, why? You have panic hardware. Well, panic hardware is required so people can get out of a building in case of a disaster, a fire, etc. But the penal code says no. Well, now you got a problem. If you do what the penal code says, then the fireman says you can't have your business here because you don't pass, Kevin. And so in the past, DOJ was like, well, okay, it meets all these requirements and the fire guys are okay with it. Okay, we'll let it go. Well, Bonta has put DOJ agents out to say, yeah, no, we want to fine you for that daily. And so they've been trying to set up daily fines. So the industry of FFLs brought this to our attention. We worked on it during the break. We have Heather Hadwick, who's out of Assembly District 1, who's absolutely fantastic. She is running this bill with us, and we're going to get this across the line because it does three main things. One, it resolves an issue. Two, it makes sure that we're not charging taxpayers any more money. Imagine that, Kevin. New laws, not costing the people money. And third, it actually improves the safety and security because the technology has improved so much in the last 40 years that it makes sense to update the legislation so that people can have this. And smaller FFLs can opt for this as well. This allows them to have all the benefits of all the different security and maintaining safety for their people.
So let me get this straight, and you can correct me if I'm not reading this 100% correctly, but it sounds like what you're saying is that you had independent regulations that were put together separately, that when combined, it kind of creates a no-win scenario for an FFL, just as far as meeting all the regulations that they're supposed to meet and have something like a door that is secure for their facility. So when you put those together, it makes it impossible for the FFL to actually be within the regulations. That was something that they weren't necessarily enforcing on FFLs until Bonta said, wait a minute, let's go ahead and potentially put some FFLs out, make some money by fining people because they weren't up to the code. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've been critiqued even by people in our community for is I'm going through the public policies that are surrounding the Second Amendment and looking for these issues because it's in these conflicts that the opposition is able to come after us. And often why we get an FFL or we get a range owner or we get somebody in the hunting community or even the everyday person, it's like, how the heck did I end up in this situation? I'm caught between two things. I go left, I'm in trouble. I go right, I'm in trouble. Like, how's this happen? It happens because a lot of these laws that get passed, number one, no one does a public policy review to see if it's in conflict. And they don't do it not just because they're lazy. It's actually much more sinister than that. They don't do it because they're trying to create spaces where they can hang people when they want to. And what I'm trying to do is go through and remove those. And so that's part of what this is. It's a step to remove that for FFLs, to improve the safety and security for the people running those gun stores, to improve public safety. And wow, imagine that. An organization that's been around for 150 years, that be safe is part of our motto. And we're pushing for safety against a legislature that claims firearm safety and actually pushes to put people in harm's way.
Yeah, a contradiction that we've talked about many times in the past, and I'm sure we will continue to so long as we have the supermajority that we have. You mentioned some other legislation that's going to be coming out of the Second Amendment community this year. What exactly does this do for the Second Amendment community as a whole? And what I'm really asking about is going on the offensive with legislation as opposed to continuing to be reactionary to the anti-2A legislation.
Well, I think one of the things is, and you're starting to see this since Donald J. Trump came into office, a lot of what I've said for a while with you on this show, Second Amendment community members are coming out of the closet, Kevin. Surprisingly, they're coming out of the closet and go, hey, I'm a gun owner and I don't like this. We saw a lot of it from the fires down here in Southern California. We're seeing that movement. And this is now a time for people not to be, Eeyores and, negative Nancy's and stuff like that, but instead to get out and say, hey, yeah, we're fighting back, we're pushing back. And by going to their local offices, going to their local legislators, going to their mayors and city council and saying, enough's enough. These are good pieces of legislation that we're putting forward, get people to talk about them and start working from the bottom up as well. And this is where anybody listening to this video can call their city council member, they can call whoever it is they want to and say, you need to put pressure on the Assembly and Senate to get this passed because this is long overdue. We want this. And if you don't want to help us out, we'll vote you out. This is the push. And this is where we need every man and woman and youth on deck to do this.
Yeah, and that will not be the last time you hear that. We continue to remind ourselves that these politicians work for us and they need to represent us appropriately, or else, like a lot of people found out in 2024, they are going to get voted out. And we're going to continue with this cultural shift that we see, and we're going to continue fighting and pushing legislation like this. I guess, Rick, you kind of got both ends of the spectrum. What are your final thoughts on these two bills, Senate Bill 15 and Assembly Bill 584? And also, what's your perspective here on the way that the legislature is unfolding for 2025?
The legislature for 2025 is unfolding with a lot of variables, a lot of factors that it was impossible to see all of them. We anticipated some of them, but as more and more things come out of the White House, as more and more the fight, the left is being spread fairly thin on many issues, and they're tripping up, they're making mistakes. A lot of their tricks and a lot of their corruption is being exposed in the public eye, which is changing the demographics of the voting base here in California as well as across the nation. And I think it's an attitude shift. I mean, attitudinally, am I surprised about things that Blake Spear and the far left put out? No. Do I realize they're going to put out some other stuff? Yeah. Are they being creative? Yeah. Because you got a bunch of 20-year-olds in there thinking that they're smarter than everybody else and they're putting this stuff out. There's something to be said for age and wisdom because you've been around. You were once a 20-year-old, thought you could get away with stuff, and you've seen what does and doesn't work. So we're thinking outside the box. They're thinking outside the box. And so it's going to be a very competitive next couple of years. But I'm looking forward to win after win after win. And we need to get our community thinking the same way.
Well, we're definitely going to look forward to that too. Doesn't mean we're not going to follow along, and of course, we are going to continue to advocate. Rick, as always, I want to thank you for taking the time. I know you're a busy guy coming on and sharing with us today.
Thank you for having me, and it's always a pleasure.
Absolutely. And guys, once again, if you like content like this, you want to stay up to date with the litigative and legislative efforts here in the state, please be sure to drop a like, share the video. Let's get this information out as far and wide as it possibly can. It is your way to directly contribute to the Second Amendment efforts here in the state. Thanks again, guys, and we'll see you on the next one.